Welcome to a breaking news edition of the Putback with Ian Begley. I'm Michelle Margot. SNY has learned that the Knicks are closing in on hiring Mike Brown as their new head coach. Ian, what is the latest news?
Knicks expected to hire Mike Brown. They have concluded their coaching search. Mike Brown met with owner James Dolan yesterday, and that told you that this was in the final stages of the process. It was Mike Brown closing the deal, essentially, once you meet with the owner, and that's where we are. So Knicks coaching search is wrapped up, and in Mike Brown, they got a coach that they wanted in terms of experience. In terms of experience, that's what the Knicks were looking for all along in this search. They did want somebody with previous head coaching experience. Taylor Jenkins, obviously, someone they interviewed. James Borrego as well. Also Micah Nori, and they did have a formal interview with Coach Dawn Staley down in South Carolina. I was told. I know my guy CP had reported that they had touched base on Staley. That was actually a formal interview, but here we are now. Mike Brown. He does see Borrego as an important addition to his staff. James Borrego, widely known around the league for his offensive acumen, spacing, player movement, ball movement. And the Knicks would have some hurdles to cross there to get Borrego out of New Orleans because New Orleans has him under contract right now. So hurdles to cross there. Could also, I would expect some coaches from Tom Thibodeau's coaching staff to be on Mike Brown's staff. The coaches interviewed. I was told that they knew that they would have autonomy to hire their own staffs, but I think there was maybe not an understanding, but just a discussion about bringing some of the guys over from the previous staff only if the coach was comfortable. So I would expect some of the previous members of Tom Thibodeau's staff to be here. Knicks obviously firing Tom Thibodeau shortly after losing to Indiana in the conference finals. Controversial decision, I would say. And, they didn't have a solid plan A going into this coaching search. It was about finding out who's out there, getting as much information as you can about the landscape. And that's why they were calling teams to interview their current head coaches and got rebuffed quite often. And I think we have Michelle back. Michelle, how are you?
I'm good. I've been here the whole time. It sounds like it did not, but would you say that the head coaching search went as the Knicks expected?
Yeah, I think that early on there was a hope that either like a Chris Finch or an Ime Udoka would somehow be available. And then it was Jason Kidd. And so I don't think you would say that. But they did want a coach with head coaching experience all along. Given where they are, this coach Mike Brown will be taking over for a team that is coming off a run to the Eastern Conference Finals for the first time in 25 years. 51 wins in the regular season, bar extremely high. So that's why the Knicks were looking for a coach with experience, and they found Mike Brown, who does have that experience, but the bar again is high. The scrutiny is going to be very, very high. Mike Brown from day one, because this is a big job, and it's a job that if you don't surpass the conference finals, depending on circumstances, fans are going to be upset, understandably. So it's going to be interesting to see how things play out from here. But clearly, the Knicks feel like in Brown, they found somebody who they can collaborate with, they can discuss decisions with, that will, prioritize young players and developing young players. I know that's been important to them, and they made their decision. And so, they still have some work to do in free agency, but right now they have the head coach.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a second. But did Mike Brown have any prior relationship to Leon Rose and the organization?
I mean, he's been around the NBA for so long. So, yeah, obviously knew Leon Rose, knew William Wesley. Um, I don't know if there were relationships beyond that, but I'm sure if he was looking at a flow chart of the Knicks organization, he could probably say he knew, 65% of their members because he's been in the league for a long time. Coached a long time. Cleveland, Lakers, assistant with the Warriors, most recently Sacramento. And I was actually talking to people who used to work for him, or work with him, I should say, and in a previous stop, and they said, look, given the opportunities out there, given the options that the Knicks have, Mike Brown's the best candidate for this job. He's if you're ranking who's out there and what they can get, Brown is clearly the best candidate for the job. They mentioned his experience. They mentioned the track record, and so this is where the Knicks fall. This is where the Knicks stand, I should say. They're getting Mike Brown. The staff will be filled out, and they will do some more work in free agency because there are some moves to be made. But this was the big domino for the Knicks, and agents were talking to the Knicks in free agency earlier. They were asking about the head coach, and some of them were told, "Hey, it's going to happen. Sit tight." And there was at least one meeting where the player wanted to hold off and wait until they were in a bit of a holding pattern until the head coach was named. So maybe you see a couple other shoes drop for the Knicks in free agency. But the big domino is out of the way now with Mike Brown.
Yeah, I obviously the organization, I'm assuming, views this as a clear upgrade from Tom Thibodeau. But why did they give up their pursuit of Jason Kidd or Billy Donovan before either got an official extension?
Yeah, I don't know if they would say. I mean, obviously they like Mike Brown a lot. They hired him, but is it a clear upgrade from Tom Thibodeau? I don't know if there was that candidate that was out there. And so I think that just comes with Brown coming here and the spotlight that will be on him in this position. But yeah, Jason Kidd, the Knicks certainly wanted him. I believe he had interest in the Knicks, but ultimately the chase kind of fell off because why? I don't know exactly why, but obviously Knicks not getting permission to speak to him. What it would have taken for Jason Kidd to wiggle out of his Mavericks deal, he would have had to really, stir things up behind the scenes, made people uncomfortable, or somehow appealed to the humanity of ownership and said, "This is my dream job." Both of those were long shots, and so I can only presume it was determined recently that Kidd was no longer an option, and then they moved forward with this interview this week with Mike Brown, which again included owner James Dolan, and Brown obviously sealed the deal in that meeting.
Obviously, you and I both know that Mike Brown has been around the NBA for quite some time, but how can he win over the fans who were expecting maybe like a flashier hire or flashier name?
Just win, and maybe play the starters fewer minutes depending on which fans you're talking about. Play the younger players depending on which fans you're talking about. But the bottom line is win games and make it to the NBA Finals. That's the bar that's been set here with the Knicks' decision to let go of Tom Thibodeau after the season that they had. And so it's really that simple. You win games, you have success, people are going to be happy. But you're going to have to win a lot of games, and you're going to have to make it deeper in the playoffs in order to, I would say, evade like the harsh scrutiny that could come with the glare here of this job because of everything that's preceded it.
How do you see Mike Brown handling the roster as it stands right now?
Yeah, I mean, barring, a seismic trade here, I don't think that this is, I think this is the roster. You're going to add maybe another guy in free agency, but LeBron James is out there. I mean, the Knicks would have to give up so much to trade for him. The Giannis situation in Milwaukee, again, you're talking about so many high hurdles to clear there before it's even a reality. So I think let's assume that this is the roster. I think what you're going to see is I think you'll see some of that too big lineup with Mitchell Robinson and Karl Anthony Towns. I think just based on how everything has gone during this search, you'll see a fewer minutes for the starters. And I think Mike Brown, he's got a history of working his teams hard, though, of practicing regularly. and so that's a part of his program, and that's something that I don't think the Knicks did that often under Tom Thibodeau. So that'll be an adjustment, and yeah, it'll be a adjustment for everybody involved after 5 years of Tom Thibodeau, a new voice in town.
Yeah, I remember some players came forward saying that, of course, they wanted Tom Thibodeau to remain the head coach. Obviously, he did not. So, what about building relationships with those players? I mean, if this is a win now, win ASAP team, how much time is it going to take for Mike Brown to build those relationships?
It'll take time, but I think too, like, these guys are professionals. I don't think this is a locker room where there's a potential fireworks. I think this is a group that they're young veterans, but they're veterans. They've been together. I don't think, unless there's some crazy schism that happens during the season on its face, I don't think this is a locker room where Mike Brown has to worry about, landing on grenades here and there. I think this is a group that, I don't think he's going to need to, spend a ton of time to establish a rapport with these guys. These guys are veterans. It's not like there's a young group here that you're dealing with. So they know the business side of it, and they have been through it, both sides. So I don't think that's an element of concern, or I don't think it should be, at least early on here in the Mike Brown tenure.
How much of a say do you think he's going to have in roster construction moving forward?
Yeah, well, Tom Thibodeau had a big say in roster construction and minor moves, and I'm sure he had input on major moves too. It probably won't be that much different with Mike Brown. Obviously, you're going to consult your head coach when you make a big move or even a minor roster move, but I would think that there'll be more of a two-way street in terms of head coach and the front office. I know that's something that the Knicks were looking for, somebody to collaborate with. And so I would expect more of an open dialogue. Sure, you're going to disagree on things, but coming to the ultimate same place decision, or the same decision, I think ultimately is what you'll have with Mike Brown in the Knicks front office if this thing does work the way everybody wants it to.
What kind of coach do you expect Mike Brown to be for this team? Like offensive, defensive, what kind of minded coach?
Yeah, look, well, if James Borrego is here, the offense should be very good. I know coaches were impressed with Brown and what he did in Sacramento, some of the things offensively, but Borrego has a great, I guess, a great acumen for offense generally. And so if he's here, and implementing what he wants to do, which is something Mike Brown would like to see, I think this offense is going to have a lot of creativity, different sets, maybe different player groupings, and it's going to be interesting to see, again, if the Knicks are able to pry Borrego out of New Orleans, what the offense looks like and how different it might be from Tom Thibodeau's approach.
All right, let's talk about the coaching staff. You mentioned it a couple times now. So you tweeted, quote, "There are hurdles to Knicks adding James Borrego to staff. New coach Mike Brown sees him as an important addition." Can you elaborate on that? And then who else will be on the staff?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we talked Borrego, but the rest of the staff, my understanding, and this is true, is that the coaches that were interviewed were told, look, you're going to have autonomy on your staff, who you want to bring, who you want to leave behind from the last regime, but there will be some holdovers from Tom Thibodeau's staff. I mean, Rick Brunson is an obvious one, but I think there will be a few other veteran assistants coming over from that last group, and so but I do think it was important for the coaches to hear in those meetings that they do have autonomy. At the same time, I'm sure it didn't hurt Mike Brown's candidacy or other coaches' candidacy if they were also open to bringing back some of the guys from Tom Thibodeau's staff. So, yeah, I mean, I think that we'll see what happens when they sit down with Mike Brown, but Mo Cheeks, Darren Erman, and Mark Bryant, I would think that those guys, along with Brunson, have a good chance at being on Mike Brown's staff.
How do you think his coaching style is going to differ from Tom Thibodeau's?
Yeah, I think, if things kind of play out the way the Knicks had hoped they would based on their search, I think you'll see a larger rotation, maybe a 9-man rotation regularly, and then you'll see some of the minutes decrease for the starters and the workload decrease for the starters, and maybe more of a mixing and matching. Although I'll say Tom Thibodeau, I thought, did a pretty good job mixing and matching off the bench. But just from a minutes perspective, yeah, I would expect that to be different. And I think when you look at Brown and his track record, again, he likes to work his teams hard. I've been told they practice a lot, and so that's not going to be that would be a departure from Thibodeau, because he did not practice a ton, especially during the regular season. So we'll see how that impacts the team, improves the team. We'll see. But yeah, it's definitely a new voice, different voice that everyone's going to have to grow accustomed to.
Jalen Brunson was very close to Tom Thibodeau. How do you think Mike Brown will match up with him specifically?
Yeah, Jalen is a professional. I mean, I'm sure that Leon Rose, I'm sure, was in touch, checking in with Jalen Brunson at different points during this search. And so what happened today was certainly not a surprise to Jalen Brunson. And he's gonna give you what he gave you under Tom Thibodeau, which is, effort every night on both sides of the ball, and very, very strong offensive play. I don't think anything's going to change there. Maybe if there was a coach who was brought in who he had a strong relationship with, like Jason Kidd, or any of his previous coaches, maybe there would be an element of that. But here, I don't think it's going to be a hurdle at all. Brunson would play hard and beat Brunson no matter who the head coach was.
Yeah, I think you're probably right on that. So obviously, based on the fact that we are talking about a new head coach, the expectations are so high. Do you think that this is like Eastern Conference Finals or failure for Mike Brown?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's fair to look at it that way, right? And not even Eastern Conference Finals, getting through the East, because you had a head coach who led you to that spot, that elevated ground where you hadn't been in 25 years. And the coach had a lot of success, and the decision was made to fire him. So the thinking is, if he wasn't the guy to get you where you wanted to go, then the new head coach is. And so, yeah, I think it's probably unfair. It's an extremely high level to reach here to meet expectations, but I do think that's fair from the fan base's perspective because of how things played out.
So Mike Brown was hired as the head coach of the Sacramento Kings in 2022. And then he was fired in December of 2024 after a 13-18 start. And this was a Sacramento Kings team that hadn't made the playoffs since 2006. And then he was named coach of the year while he was there. So what went wrong in Sacramento to where he didn't last very long?
Depending on who you talk to, you heard. I would say that he actually had a big impact early on on the Kings. He did have success in his tenure there in Sacramento, but at the tail end there, you hear that some of the players in the locker room he lost them, and maybe they, once you have a disconnect with your players, depending on which players they are. That's never a good thing in this league. And so there was also some veterans, felt that this was something where Brown, maybe the offensive approach, some veterans questioned it. But look, no one's going to have every player love them in their locker room. So some of that is par for the course for the league. But I do think the disconnect that developed there between Brown and some of the players in that Kings locker room, some people say he lost the locker room. That's a blanket statement. I'm sure it was specific issues, but I do think that hurt him there in the end in Sacramento.
All right, so let's move on to free agency. You mentioned, players a while back when we first started the show. So Knicks signed center Gershon Yabusele and are rumored to intend to sign Jordan Clarkson once he becomes a free agent. Are these the type of players that Mike Brown likes to coach?
Yeah, I can't really answer that because I don't know like his fit in terms of if he has a player he likes. There was a mix of players in Sacramento. I don't know if they fit one archetype, but I would assume that as the Knicks were going through free agency, they also had a pretty good idea, especially in the last few days, that it was going to be Mike Brown. And so you're making moves with that in mind. I don't know if he was consulted or not. I don't want to go that far, but obviously, if you're far down the road with Mike Brown at the start of free agency, you're going to make decisions with that in mind if you think it's likely to get to the end. And so I assume that Yabusele and a Clarkson, the two guys they brought in, are two guys that Mike Brown would ultimately be in favor of and look forward to coaching.
All right, so if you had to guess, what moves are left for the Knicks this offseason?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think fireworks in LA, fireworks in Milwaukee. I think that is there's such a low probability of that. So I think most likely Knicks either make a small trade to shed some salary, or find another way to trim some money and fit a veterans minimum under the second apron and bring in a vet. And they had touched base with Ben Simmons. I'm sure they touched base with many other players. They had interest in bringing Landry Shamet back. So I think that's kind of what you'll see here is them filling that final roster spot, getting that veterans minimum, sneaking it under the second apron, and they are hard capped again at the second apron because of the exception that they used to sign Yabusele. So it's important for them to get, I think, one more guy in there. So it'll either be, via trade or maybe the numbers on the Yabusele deal, the final numbers allow them to come in under that second apron.
So what realistically are Ian Begley's expectations for the Knicks in 2025, 2026? You know this team better than anybody.
I mean, look, the expectation and the bar has to be finals. That it has to be that because logic tells you that you change your head coach after making that run to the conference final. The next guy you bring in is you'd expect to do better. So it's got to be the finals, and that's a crazy high bar for any team in any pro sport. But the scenario that they're in now, similar to Girardi and Boone with the Yankees. If you're expecting to take that next step with a new voice, that next step is NBA Finals, and especially, Eastern Conference. Jason Tatum hurt, Tyrese Halliburton hurt, Milwaukee, Damian Lillard just got waived. So there are teams that were at the top that are dealing with injury issues, big ones. So there's a pathway here for the Knicks. I think that has to be the expectation.
It sounds like maybe he won't have a super long leash, but I guess time will tell and just see how things play out. So once again, the Knicks closing in on hiring Mike Brown as their new head coach, finally naming their replacement for Tom Thibodeau. Be sure to check out SNY and Ian Begley on social media for more Knicks news throughout the offseason. Ian, thank you so much for joining us. I'm Michelle Margot. Thank you so much for watching.